Hello and welcome to The Exchange. Today we're joined by the former Sri Lankan ambassador to the United States. He just returned to Sri Lanka and he is former politician Mahinda Samarasinghe. Ambassador, welcome.
Thank you.
Not many people know, but you do have a diplomatic background. Now, for example, we know you, or most people know you, as a politician who turned diplomat. But your start was in the diplomatic field. Talk us through that.
No, precisely. Soon after university, I worked for a private company in Australia, and then I joined the Foreign Service, and my first posting was to Canberra in Australia. And then after that, I was given Geneva at a permanent mission of Sri Lanka to the UN in Geneva. So I had worked actually close to 5.5 years in those two posts. And then in 1987, when I came back to Sri Lanka, I was invited into politics by President Jayawardena. And my start was the UMP. I was in the UMP for 18 years. And now, this last posting that I had was, I suppose, a finish off to my, going back to my origins, and doing another close to 5 years. So I've completed in all, I would say, about 10 years in the Foreign Service.
So in a way, you've completed full circle.
Yeah, I came into politics and then went back to my origin.
A democratically elected government was pretty much ousted, and then came in a president, and then another in 2024. So all in all, you worked under 3 presidents. So given that is the case, and also 16 other envoys were removed, you were the only one which this current government kept on. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, I never asked, why are you keeping me? I just continued working.
But did you have an inkling, okay, this might be the reason?
I didn't take the telephone and ask the president to keep me. I was prepared to go if they wanted me to come back. But they wanted me to stay on. My contract period was only finishing in December of this year. So I had, time there. And of course, that was never a criteria to decide on whether to keep ambassadors or not, because all the other 16 also had time left, but they were recalled. So they decided to keep me on, and I kept on working, and I worked very well with them. And, I also was able to show a lot of results.
I mean, now it is publicized that you played a significant role in getting the tariff set by the United States to Sri Lanka down to 10%. Originally it was at 44%, and then negotiations prevailed, and then you had a hand in getting it down to 20%, and then from 12.5% to 10%. So 2 key interventions by you. Please talk us through that.
Yeah, so last April, the whole world was taken by surprise when President Trump came out with this reciprocal tariff policy. And the formula that they used was actually the trade deficit. Although our quantum was, relatively speaking, very much less than a lot of the other trading partners of the US, the difference between their imports and our exports to the US took us to one of the highest levels on the reciprocal tariff policy, which was 44%. So we were only second to Vietnam. So that was a big blow, and our businessmen obviously were shocked, and they wanted the government to respond immediately. And I got the news when I was actually coming to Sri Lanka on some other work, and it was in the plane that my team at the embassy sent me this message to say we are at 44. So that was working in my mind all the time. And then when I came back here, I got in touch with the officials at the Treasury and others, and we were able to also, during that 4 or 5 days that I was here, I was able to meet the industry, and I made some suggestions, and then I went back and got to work. And the next step was actually the next announcement, we got down to 33%. So that was once again a big, positive outcome for Sri Lanka, because compared to some other countries that we were competing with, we were at 33%, we were slightly better, but at 44%, we were only next to Vietnam was the highest, and we were number 2. So then we continued to have our negotiations with the USTR, and of course, apart from the official negotiations that we had, I did a lot of background work. I was meeting them regularly, day-to-day management of our positions, talking to Colombo, getting inputs from Colombo, getting back to them, and getting vital information from the US side as to what they are looking for, and then sharing it with Colombo and motivating Colombo to compromise so that we meet at least the US halfway. So all those things took a lot of time.
So you had to actually call and motivate Colombo to actually meet the US halfway.
I had to do that obviously because they didn't know what was happening in Washington, and I had to push all the time. And I must say the team in Colombo reciprocated very well. They had a lot of regard and respect for what I had to say, and they took my suggestions on board. They consulted the president, got the green light from the president, and came back to me quite quickly. So we never had a problem, in terms of me suggesting the course of action that needs to be taken, and them getting it through with the policymakers in the political side, being neutralized and getting them on board as well, and then coming back to me and saying, okay, Ambassador, now you can go ahead and inform them that we are in agreement, or maybe if we didn't agree, this is our compromise position. So that's the way we moved it forward. And then of course the 20% we arrived at was another great victory, because we were at the same level with almost all of our competitive countries. But what is important to remember, and this is something that Sri Lankan audience should be conscious of, that Sri Lanka is one of the few countries that was able to achieve the 20% and now the 10% without concluding a trade agreement with the US. All our major competitor countries, I don't want to, for diplomatic reasons, I don't want to mention names of countries, other countries, but all our major competitive countries have signed trade agreement with the US, and that is why they were able to get to the same level.
But that also carries an inherent risk of things falling apart quite quickly. So should the government be diligent and sort of get there as soon as possible?
We have to now also lock this 10% in. The other countries, our trading partners who are at 10%, only 17 countries got 10%. Right? The bulk of the countries are still at 12.5%, and some of them have also signed agreements. But the 17 countries, out of the 17 countries, only 2 have not signed an agreement and got the 10%. So now there will be further investigations on under the broad heading of free trade. So last investigation under the 301 law that they were using for these investigations, after the Supreme Court ruled out the reciprocal tariffs and moved out the 20%, the President Trump went into what was called a global tariff, right, under another law. And now under this 301 law, they are doing various investigations. Now, last investigation was on forced labor, and we were also being investigated, and only 17 countries passed that investigation, and Sri Lanka was one country. So I got the information as to what they were looking for.
But how did you get the information?
Yeah, so that's a skill that good diplomats should possess. I mean, but
So
you don't talk about that.
You used your personal connection?
Yeah, you don't talk about these things. Main thing is to get the correct information.
You got the job done.
And pass it down to your capital and motivate the capital to go along with what you're suggesting, and then enjoy the results. So that's what we did. But you asked a very, very good question. Now, how do we guarantee this 10%? Only way that we can guarantee this 10% would be to sign the agreement finally, right? So we need to put that on the fast track and lock this 10% in, because there's going to be other 301 investigations. Now the next one that they've already started, that is what is called excess capacity.
Are these the ones you had in mind when you warned the country of complacency?
Yeah. So the 301 investigations will have several sectors that they will use under the broad heading of free trade. So one was forced labor, the next one is excess capacity. Now fortunately, Sri Lanka is not being investigated for excess capacity, right? But some of our major competitor countries will be investigated for excess capacity. So there is a possibility that for a brief period of time, Sri Lanka may enjoy this comparative advantage of being at 10%, and those countries who are being investigated and who may not pass the investigation may go up to 12.5 from 10. So we will have that brief period, but then there will be other 301 investigations in different sectors. So we may get caught up in the future in one of those, and Sri Lanka may also go to 12.5. But what is really worrying me is, and I've told this to the government as well, is the midterm elections in the US coming up in November. So President Trump obviously wants to have his Republican majority intact, right, after the elections. So this is a political mode that is now evolving, and it'll increase as we move forward, and political decisions would be taken to get political advantage, right? So revenue generation is number one priority for President Trump, because any budget of the US would want to, in an election year, would want to propose certain benefits to the average US voter, and the tariffs have been identified as one of the best devices to generate extra revenue. So there is a possibility that he might even increase the tariffs beyond 12.5. We can't rule that out. So if Sri Lanka by that time is able to sign the agreement and lock the 10% in, then we will be safe.
Now you said you've already told the government. Was it just a passing word, or was it beautifully illustrated in a document and submitted to the government?
Oh yes. I always put it in writing.
So they know about the risks ahead.
But my point is that the match is not over. We need to be constantly vigilant. We need to constantly get the right information from those people on the US side who take these decisions. We have to get it before any other country gets it, and then act on it, so that we would have that comparative advantage over other countries. So for that you need that constant follow-up. And this is why, looking at it from a point of view of the country, this is why I have said publicly that I'm willing to offer my services to the government, not by going back as US ambassador, but I could do it from here. I could do it from here because I have built those wonderful contacts there. They have a lot of respect for me. But of course, if I'm going to negotiate on behalf of Sri Lanka, I need a position. I can't just say I'm Mahinda Samarasinghe, now listen to me. I need to say I'm so and so, and this is my position, and I'm speaking on behalf of the government of Sri Lanka. Because the consequences would be grave. 25% of our exports go to the US. That's the single largest market for our exports in the world. Out of the 25%, 70% almost are apparel products. Now, I don't have to tell your viewers the importance of the apparel industry. Hundreds of thousands of jobs are dependent on the apparel industry. It brings a huge export income, foreign exchange income into the country. So, if we don't retain our comparative advantage vis-a-vis our major competitors internationally, we are finished. Our private industry, our private sector would probably have to close shop here. Because how are they going to, compete internationally for markets? So this is why it's so important that we are on top of things always. And I'm looking at it purely from a country point of view and not a personal point of view. I mean, I'm quite happy to, hang my boots and say now, I've done 45 years of public service. I'm not interested in working anymore. I want to travel. I want to be with my family. I have 3 grandchildren whom I want to spend time with, and I can relax and enjoy life. But I have this passionate feeling about my country, about my motherland, and having been in politics, that has been even more enhanced. And I want to continue to serve my country, and this is why I offered my services.
So, yeah, you say that you've offered your services to the government and you don't necessarily seek a position in government. You don't want to be in politics anymore, at least for the time being. So let's circle back to that. When you offer your services, one could argue, okay, Mahinda Samarasinghe, the politician, had different political views to that of the current government. So how could these two mix and match going forward? Is that something that you're concerned about, or is it a fair question for somebody to actually put to you?
Well, from what I know, this government doesn't look at that as a criteria to get the services of people, because if you look at some of the key positions that they have retained or given after they came into power, some of these personalities, I don't want to mention names, are supporters of other political parties, and they may be supporters of other political parties privately even now, but of course not talking politics or being active in politics. So for any human being, any citizen of this country, they have a political right or fundamental right to decide on whom they want to support politically. Some do it actively, others do it passively, but exercise that right at the time of voting. So as I said, I've gone on record as saying I'm not interested in going back into a political career. I want to offer my services, apolitically, and I have worked with 3 presidents. Right, I was appointed during President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's time. I continued with President Ranil Wickremesinghe, and President Anukumar Dissanayake continued to keep me. So I have worked perfectly with all 3 of them. I have never had any problems with working any of the 3 presidents whom I have worked with, and of course the governments that were headed by them. So I can offer my services without doing politics or thinking politics, and they know that, and it's up to them now to take a decision whether they want to continue to get my services.
You mentioned the Trump factor and also how the looming polls there could play a role in the whole tariff saga, how that could change the tariff landscape. President Trump divides the room, and that's very well publicized. Yeah. So, given what happened in Gaza, continues to happen in Gaza, and also the war on Iran, what is your take on what the U.S. populace's sentiment is towards President Trump?
No, I mean, that's of course something that Americans should comment. I don't want to comment on what people's feelings are towards the sitting president of the United States. But as far as the war in Iran is concerned, Sri Lanka has always been very clear. We want to see an end to the war. We want to see freedom of navigation in the Hormuz Strait. And those are two things that we have gone on record as declaring being Sri Lankan foreign policy towards the war in Iran. So hopefully there will be a breakthrough which will not go back or be rolled back as we have seen in the past. They've come to agreements, but then after a couple of weeks they started fighting again. So we want to see an end to this fighting because it's affecting Sri Lanka and Sri Lankans economically. I don't have to give you the reasons why, but everyone knows, the oil prices have gone up. That has a very negative effect on, as a net importer of oil in Sri Lanka, that has a negative effect on other sectors of the economy. Inflation has gone up as a result of, and it's not only Sri Lanka. All countries are experiencing this situation as a result of the war. So we want to see an end to the war. We want to see restoration of freedom of navigation in the Hormuz Strait, and hopefully that will happen sooner than later.
Moving on to Sri Lanka's tumultuous time during the economic crisis, Sri Lanka went into this IMF program, and as it happens, you had a role in that too. So how did that come about? What was your involvement in that?
The IMF, you mean? Yes. Well, the initial idea of going for an IMF program came from my side. I was actually having a discussion with my staff, with my diplomatic officers at the embassy one day, and we were looking at what was happening in Sri Lanka, the shortage of essential items in Sri Lanka, the protest building up amongst the people because of the lack of necessities for them to live. So we were having a discussion, and I said, from my I'm an economist by profession, so I look at these things in a sort of in a more detailed manner, and I felt that the only way out would be for us to get assistance internationally, and the IMF was the agency that I thought would be able to help us. Of course, World Bank and others, ADB and so on, are always there. But the IMF is known to help countries getting out of this kind of economic challenges. And I said that's what I feel as a way out that Sri Lanka should take. And I said, get me the managing director of the IMF. I would like to speak to her and propose a visit to Sri Lanka to discuss the possibility of an agreement with the IMF. So my staff got me the appointment. I spoke with her, and I suggested to her, by that time, things were pretty clear, that we were heading for economic disaster. IMF was tracking, so she was aware of the economic dire straits, economically speaking, that Sri Lanka was facing. And I said, would you consider sending a high-level team to meet with the president and the finance minister? There won't be any other appointments, no media coverage, but I want this team to go and call it the way that you see it, right? Don't pull back any punches, so to speak. If it's bad news that you have to give the president, give the bad news, because he must hear that, right? Maybe his advisors are not telling him the full story.
Would it have been your advice had a different president being incumbent at the time, or was that advice specific to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa?
No, it was not specific. It was just that, he was the man who was the elected president of the country, and he had to take a decision whether we were going to go in for an IMF program or not. So I had to deal with him, obviously. And I must say the managing director of the IMF was spontaneously in agreement with me. And the head of the delegation who went to Sri Lanka is now, or was, the immediate governor of the Central Bank of Korea, South Korea. So it was, and I'm just giving you his background to show you, to tell your viewers, that it was at a very high level that this two-member delegation went to Sri Lanka. I arranged the meeting with President Gotabaya and the finance minister. They met the two of them. Before they went, they came and asked me, now how do we deal with your president? I said, don't hold back any punches. Tell them, if it's bad news, you just have to tell him the way you see it. Don't be diplomatic, because he has to hear it, the way that you want to communicate. So that's how they went to Sri Lanka and communicated their message to the president. And then they came back and they met me and they said, well, we took your advice. We didn't hold back any punches. We told your president exactly the way that we see things in Sri Lanka. And they said we would appreciate being notified as to whether your government wants to go in for an IMF program or not. So then I spoke to President Gotabaya and I said, they're expecting a communication from you, so as soon as you can, whether it's yes or no, you have to communicate to them. So please do so. And I was quite surprised that within 2 weeks, he sent me a letter that he had sent to the managing director of the IMF, saying that Sri Lanka was willing to go in for an IMF program. So that's the genesis, that's the start of the IMF program. And of course, when he was ousted and then President Ranil Wickremesinghe was appointed by Parliament to serve the rest of his term, President Ranil Wickremesinghe took it very seriously, the IMF program, and he continued discussions with them. And then the agreement was signed during President Ranil Wickremesinghe's period. Of course, being in Washington, I was constantly in touch with IMF and pushing them and giving information, necessary information, required information to President Ranil Wickremesinghe and others who were in charge of these negotiations. And then finally, as I said, the agreement was signed and the program was implemented. And President Ranil Wickremesinghe, as a result of the discipline that he showed and the apolitical stance that he took on reforms, he didn't think of politics. He didn't think of what was going to be beneficial for him at a future election in the context of reforms. He saw the reform. He looked at the reforms and he thought it was a necessity, and he started implementing the necessity regardless of the political flack. And of course, very soon macroeconomic fundamentals began coming back on track. And Sri Lanka was actually being used as a model country whenever other countries also had these kinds of economic challenges, that going in for an the IMF program, you can recover. And when I was during the trouble period, before the IMF program, everywhere I went, people were saying, we're very sorry to see what's happening in your country. And after the IMF program, after a few months after it was being implemented and we were getting the benefits of it, people at all levels in the US were praising Sri Lanka. So that was sweet music in my ears. I was very proud of the fact that Sri Lanka was now being used as a model country. So that's how it all started, and President Anurukumar Dissanayake is continuing that, and then getting the fruits.
Ambassador, I think right now you're in a position to put one of the key questions to bed, which is basically when it comes to the United States and any manner of support extended by the United States, there are skeptics out there which say, they're very quick to question the intentions. So when they supported Sri Lanka's IMF program, Was there any demand from their side for any manner of geopolitical leverage?
Absolutely nothing.
None whatsoever.
In fact, I must, having said that, having said that absolutely there were no demands whatsoever, I must also categorically say that without the US support, Sri Lanka would never have got the IMF program. In fact, it was not only the IMF board approval that US was crucial in supporting and getting for Sri Lanka, that approval, but also when the international sovereign bond holders, one of them, took Sri Lanka to court, it was the US Treasury that weighed in and ensured that our deal was not, we deal with the ISBs, the sovereign bond holders were not disrupted in any way or not going off track. So the US has been a true friend of Sri Lanka, and this must be understood by the people of Sri Lanka. They have never demanded anything from us. Now, for example, during my period, they gave a huge ship, worth millions of dollars. I was, working very closely with the State Department in getting that through Congress, in the US Congress, because there were some human rights issues that came up. Especially, some of the actions that had taken place in Haiti with some members of our peacekeeping operation who had been there. And I was able to liaise with the Defense Ministry, get the right information. Fortunately, the Defense Ministry had taken the right course of action. And we had already built a lot of friends on Capitol Hill. I had actually by that time met over 50 senators and congressmen personally, and most of them came from the two foreign affairs committees of the two houses. So I had friends whom I could speak to, and as a result, we got the ship free of charge. We got 10 helicopters recently. Sri Lanka had only 3 helicopters when we got these 10 helicopters from the US. So the US has been always very, very generous towards Sri Lanka, and they have not boasted about it. And this is why I put out this publication, commemorating 250 years of US independence, to thank the US for all what they have done during the 250 years for Sri Lanka.
Now, when the IMF thing came about, you were already the ambassador to the United States. It was also President Gotabaya who sent you there.
Yeah.
How did that come about? Because at the time, well, you were an ex-minister, but at that moment in time, you were an MP. So talk us through that.
Yeah. So I was elected during that term of parliament, but unfortunately, President Rajapaksa didn't utilize not only me, but there were 3 or 4 others who had similar levels of experience. We were just relegated to the background. We had to sit down as backbenchers in Parliament, and for me, that was a big come down, because I had been chief government whip in the Parliament of Sri Lanka. I had been the chief opposition whip of the Parliament of Sri Lanka, so I held very high positions there. I was a member of the Constitutional Committee of Sri Lanka. So, having done all that, and having been a cabinet minister for nearly 17 or 18 years in with different governments, I thought that they will utilize my experience, but they didn't. And by that time, I had got a bit disillusioned also of politics. And then there was this call one day from President Gotabaya Rajapaksa asking me to nominate someone, whether I can suggest someone to go as US ambassador from Sri Lanka. So I was wondering, why is he asking me? He hasn't used me. He put me in as a backbencher, but why is he reaching out to ask me as to who is suitable to go as US ambassador? So I said jokingly, while we were talking, if you like, I will go. Then he immediately responded. He was very happy, obviously. he said, well, Mahinda, if you're going, then I don't have to look for anyone else. So I said, well, give me some time. I have to consult my family. I'll get back to you. And then I discussed it with my family, and they said, well, what's the point in you being in Parliament, because they're not utilizing you. You want to serve the country. You can do more as US Ambassador. So I think you should go. They said, they think that I should go. So that was how the whole thing started. And I asked Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the president at that time, asked him, why are you sending me to the US? And then he said, well, I want to see Sri Lanka moving closer to the US, right? Because Sri Lanka can benefit a lot from moving closer to the US. So I said, fine. I said, that's exactly what I also would like to see happening. And I will move Sri Lanka forward closer to the US. And that's how I started. And I must say, when I first went there 4 years and 8 months ago, the reception was not that great, right? There was a lot of sort of misgivings, misunderstandings, misinterpretations of how previous governments had acted. And especially when I went to the Capitol Hill and met all these senators and congressmen, they were all always asking, why are you sort of, being used by certain countries? So it was not a great reception, but as a result of constant reaching out to all levels of US government as well as politicians that matter in the US system, I was able to eradicate that misunderstanding and misinterpretation situation, and people began trusting Sri Lanka more and more there. And of course I built confidence and was able to use that confidence in the best interest of Sri Lanka on many occasions. So I must say, when I left, when I spoke to my staff, I said, I'm happy mostly the fact that I was able to move Sri Lanka away from that sort of very negative position that we were 4 years and 8 months ago, to a high point in bilateral relations, right? And the result of that high point in bilateral relations was all the things that I just mentioned to you, that we have got and we have received from the US.
But there is also something curious here. Now, under President, this is the same man, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had you as a backbencher. And at the same time, he placed a lot of trust in you and sent you to the United States. How do you read that?
That's a bit of a thing for me also to grapple with.
You care to find out?
I haven't been able to figure out why. That's a contradiction, as you quite rightly say. He could have used me in Sri Lanka, given all my experience and all that. But then he gives me this sort of the cream of the diplomatic service. And he says, I want to move Sri Lanka closer to the US. But I'm not complaining, because it was a blessing in disguise. I went at the right time. I was not associated with anything that happened in Sri Lanka. And maybe my lucky stars, helped me to take that decision and go there at the right time. And I, did what I had to do. And now, the goodwill that has been generated as a result of my performance there is personally very satisfying to me as well. And it's part of my legacy now.
Now, you were Sri Lanka's ambassador to the number one global superpower.
Yeah.
And that particular superpower is concerned about number two superpower. And Sri Lanka has close ties with that superpower, China, as well. So how concerned was the United States, at least from your experience, about China's influence on Sri Lanka as well as its presence in Sri Lanka? Now, we have a port run by them in Hambantota, so what was their take?
Well, they used to ask me that very same question, whenever I used to, engage with them, how do you use China? So I used to tell them China is a long-standing traditional friend of Sri Lanka. Historically, they have helped us, numerous occasions, and they still help Sri Lanka. But that is not the point. Our objective is to reach out to you and to cultivate our relationship with you into something of mutual benefit. And it's not only with the US, our objective is also to cultivate and reach out and cultivate a good working relationship for mutual benefit with all countries in the world, especially the West, because we can see the West being able to help Sri Lanka in terms of foreign direct investment and other areas that the economy needs to move forward with. So, that's the line that I always took. I never sort of, said, we don't want China, we want you. I told them the truth, and they didn't sort of kick back on that and say, because you are saying this, we don't trust you. I suppose because I told them the truth, they trusted me even more. And they knew the way that I acted and spoke and, did what had to be done as ambassador was very sincere.
While we're on the topic of China, you have a slightly different story to what the general populace is aware of in terms of how China ended up with a 99-year lease of the Hambantota Port. So even China has come out and said, we never suggested the lease. It was the proposal by the Sri Lankan side. But you have a different experience, slightly different experience. What was that experience?
Well, I went into this whole, the background to this deal, and because I was port minister after the cabinet had approved the deal with the Chinese side to lease the Hambantota Port. So, from what I was told was that when President Ranil Wickremesinghe had gone and had this head of state meeting, summit level meeting with the President of China, when he had asked for a delay in the loan payments because we were finding it difficult, the Ports Authority was finding it difficult to pay back the loan. The Chinese side had said, well, we can't do some things only for Sri Lanka because there are other countries who are also asking for delay of loan payments. But we are willing to put forward two companies. You choose one company, and then we'll go in for a lease, and it has to be a long-term lease. And we will pay for that long-term lease, and you can use that money to pay back the loan. So that's how the whole thing started. And then by the time I became the port minister, the deal had been done. So I had to actually execute the agreement. And that's when the US ambassador at that time and the Indian High Commission at that time made frequent visits to the port ministry to see me, because they were very concerned about the security aspect of the Hambantota Port for geopolitical reasons and for security of the Indian Ocean region, Indo-Pacific region. So they wanted certain guarantees, and I got those guarantees. I got those checks and balances into the agreement. For example, the agreement says that the Navy has the right to board any ship that comes to the port of Hambantota. Security in that entire area is in the hands of the Navy. The Navy can, Navy is the controlling authority as far as security is concerned. Any warships that want to call on the Hambantota Port has to get permission from the Defense Ministry of Sri Lanka. So all those things I added to the agreement. It was not there There was an agreement when I became port minister, but these things were not there. So I brought those checks and balances in. The Chinese side was quite happy in accommodating. They didn't say no to those clauses that I put in. And that's how the whole thing ended.
You represented Sri Lanka in the United States under 3 different regimes.
Yeah.
Which one of the 3 was the easiest to represent in Washington?
All 3 presidents I had a very good working relationship with. I'm not going to say one is better than the other. That's what you want me to say, but I'm not going to say that. I had a very good working relationship with everyone. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to achieve the results that I finally achieved for Sri Lanka.
Spoken like a true diplomat. Final question.
Yeah.
Now, you insist that you're not going to get back into politics, and you've offered your services to the government, whichever the capacity, as long as it's non-political. So, what is your backup?
Capacity? It has
Which
to
is
be
not
international
political.
relations.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's strictly international relations. Right. Okay. So, what is your backup plan if the current administration decides not to take you up on your offer? What are your immediate plans?
Well, my immediate plans is to play a lot of golf. I've been playing golf for 40 years, so it may sound elitist, but that's a sport that I like. So I'll play a lot of that. And I like to travel. I'll travel with my wife and others. I have 3 wonderful grandchildren who I would like to spend more time with. So I have plenty of things to do. I read a lot of books, and I'll enjoy my retirement.
You're not going to be disappointed if you don't get a phone call from the president's office?
No, not at all. I mean, it's incumbent on them, really. I don't expect them to, it's not a must, right? They have to make the assessment, and they have to take the decision whether they want to continue obtaining my services. And if they don't, then somewhere in the future, someone else will. Who knows?
Ambassador, the conversation has been riveting. Thank you very much for coming in the exchange.